The hidden psychology of procrastination. You had every intention of starting today. You even thought about starting. Quite extensively, actually. You thought about it while making coffee. You thought about it while checking your phone. You thought about it while watching one more video. That led to another video. That somehow led to a 40-minute documentary about penguins. And now it's 9 p.m. You still haven't started. But you do know a surprising amount about penguin migration. If this sounds familiar, you're in excellent company. And more importantly, you are not lazy. You are not undisciplined. And you are certainly not fundamentally broken. According to decades of psychological research, you're simply human. Here's the most important thing science has discovered about procrastination, and it overturns almost everything we've been told. Procrastination is not primarily a time management problem. If that surprises you, you're not alone. It surprised psychologists too. For years, the advice was always the same. Buy another planner. Organize your calendar. Set tighter deadlines. Develop more discipline. We treated procrastination like a scheduling problem, a diary problem, something that could be solved if only you became organized enough. But after decades of research, a remarkably consistent picture has emerged. Procrastination is primarily a problem of emotion regulation, not time management. Let that sink in. You're not avoiding the task. You're avoiding the feeling the task creates. The anxiety, the uncertainty, the fear of getting it wrong, the perfectionism, the overwhelm of not knowing where to begin. The task isn't the real obstacle. The emotional weather surrounding it is. And your brain, being the sophisticated survival machine it is, has found an extremely effective solution. Do, literally, anything else. Here's what's actually happening inside your brain. And it's genuinely fascinating. Imagine your brain as two systems negotiating. On one side is the amygdala, your brain's ancient alarm system. Its job isn't to make you successful. Its job is to keep you safe. It responds quickly, emotionally, and it has very little interest in your 5-year plan. On the other side sits your prefrontal cortex, the planner, the strategist, the rational voice that knows the deadline is Friday and understands exactly why today's work matters. But here's the problem. When the amygdala decides something feels threatening, the prefrontal cortex often loses the argument. Not because it's weak, because evolution designed it that way. Your brain is trying to protect you, even when nothing dangerous is actually happening. A difficult email, a blank document, a job application, an important conversation. These aren't life-threatening, but they can still trigger anxiety. And anxiety, to the amygdala, is close enough. So your brain chooses immediate emotional relief over long-term reward, which explains why you can know exactly what you should be doing. Want to do it, understand the consequences of not doing it, and somehow end up reorganizing the kitchen cupboards instead. This isn't a character flaw. It's a neurological hierarchy. And in that hierarchy, your amygdala gets the casting vote. Now here's where the story becomes even more interesting. Because procrastination doesn't actually remove the task. It simply changes where the task lives. In the 1920s, Russian psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik noticed something peculiar while sitting in a Viennese restaurant. The waiters could remember astonishingly complex orders without writing anything down. But the moment a meal was served and paid for, they forgot it almost immediately. Back in the laboratory, she tested this observation. Participants were asked to complete a series of tasks. Sometimes they were interrupted before finishing. Later, people consistently remembered the unfinished tasks far better than the completed ones. Today we know this as the Zeigarnik Effect, and it explains something every procrastinator understands. The task you haven't started never really leaves you. It sits quietly in the background, borrowing attention, borrowing mental energy, appearing uninvited just as you're trying to fall asleep. When enough unfinished tasks accumulate, your attention becomes fragmented. Your brain keeps returning to everything that's unresolved, creating a subtle but persistent layer of stress, which leads to one of procrastination's greatest ironies. We procrastinate to escape discomfort, but in doing so, we stretch that discomfort across the entire day. Congratulations. That is an extraordinarily inefficient system. Fortunately, the Zeigarnik Effect also points towards one of the simplest solutions psychologists have discovered. Start. Anywhere. Not perfectly. Not completely. Just start. Open the document. Write one sentence. Read one page. Make one phone call. Because the moment you begin, your brain's relationship with the task fundamentally changes. It is no longer an unopened threat. It becomes an open loop. And the very psychology that once pushed you away now begins pulling you forward. The greatest myth procrastinators believe is this: I'll start when I feel motivated. Research suggests the opposite is usually true. Action comes first. Motivation often follows. You don't wait until you feel like beginning. You begin, and your brain gradually catches up. There is one final discovery that completely changed how psychologists think about procrastination. And it might be the most surprising finding of all. The way most people respond to procrastination actually makes it worse. The self-criticism, the guilt, the internal lecture, the comparison with imaginary productive people who somehow wake up at 5 a.m., never procrastinate, and probably color-code their sock drawer. It feels motivating. It feels deserved. But research led by psychologist Kristin Neff tells a very different story. People who practice self-compassion consistently procrastinate less. They recover from setbacks more quickly, and they experience lower levels of stress. Why? Because self-criticism is itself a threat. It activates the same emotional systems that triggered the procrastination in the first place. You procrastinate because something feels emotionally uncomfortable. Then you criticize yourself, which creates even more emotional discomfort, which your brain responds to by avoiding the task again. It's an almost perfect feedback loop. The research isn't suggesting you lower your standards. It's suggesting that shame is remarkably ineffective as a motivational strategy. So, what does psychology actually recommend? First, recognize that the obstacle probably isn't the task itself. It's the emotion attached to it. Name it: fear, perfectionism, uncertainty, overwhelm. Naming the emotion often weakens its grip. Second, begin. Not tomorrow. Not when inspiration strikes. Today. Small, messy, imperfect. Because your brain doesn't need perfection. It simply needs a beginning. And finally, when the penguins win, be kind to yourself. Not because kindness is easier. Because according to decades of psychological research, it's more effective. The next time you catch yourself procrastinating, remember this: your brain isn't asking you to finish. It's asking you to begin. One sentence, 1 minute, one tiny action. Because action changes emotion far more often than emotion changes action. And the life you want probably isn't waiting on motivation. It's waiting on the moment you finally decide to start. What have you been putting off? I'd genuinely love to know. Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy exploring the psychology, neuroscience, and philosophy behind human behavior, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.